Welcome to the show. It has been over a year since I last spoke with our next guest. One of my favorite people to interview. If you enjoy this interview, please check out our past episodes of 9 and 29. We have today with us psychic and author of the Joy Chronicles, and now making her third appearance on the In Search of Reality podcast. I'd like to welcome Joy Elaine to the show. How you doing, Joy?
I like to correct you on one little thing of your statement. I don't consider myself a psychic.
No?
Yeah.
I
did an interview and the guy thought I was a psychic, and these people were calling and asking about so-and-so and so-and-so. I said, I don't know. I'm not a psychic.
So you don't.
That doesn't mean that I don't get it. I do get information, but I don't sit down and tell people, well, so-and-so, your brother who passed away is trying to,
Yeah,
that's not my thing.
I do feel like you get information of like when you astral travel and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Is that not psychic ability, or is that something?
That's, you think of psychics and you go and you sit down at the booth and they've got their tarot cards or they've got their crystals and you're asking questions about what's going to happen in my life. And I used to do that every once in a while, but then I realized, what's going to happen in my life changes every nanosecond. I mean, the future is just not fixed. And I decided I wanted to be more in control of deciding what's going to happen in my life. So that's why I've studied the different modalities that I've studied, to be able to clear away all the stuff that keeps me from following my inner guidance, my higher self, my God connection. That's really the most important thing that I think people can do, is to, whatever modality they like, if they're meditating, if they're doing Reiki, if they're, just taking walks in the woods, if they're, whatever makes them feel like they're more connected to their true nature and their source. I think that's really what I encourage people that I'm doing. I'm doing things that I enjoy. I'm doing a lot of reading right now. I like to read fantasy books. Even though, people think my books are fantasy and they look like they're fantasy, but they're not. They're my experiences with ascended masters. So it's fun. It's fun for me to do. Finding out where we are, where we're going, and how I can be part of going there with more ease and grace.
I love that. And I think it is important that people connect with oneself and gain better understanding of, yourself. For me, that's definitely a top priority and one of my top goals of reasons for being here right now. So
yeah,
I think with that, you can, if that is your goal, as you're going through the process and trying to obtain, a better understanding, I think you learn a lot about a lot of different things, right? And you also, I think, you have a lot of fun doing it, and I think you gain an enjoyment in life with it, right?
Yeah. Yes. Right. And what you learn is it always comes back to you. It's like when I got divorced about 20 years ago, I thought, well, there goes most of my problems. And then I realized shortly thereafter that no, I still had half of those problems at least. So, it's and I think people sometimes they get discouraged because they think, well, what difference can I make? And the thing is, you can make a difference in your own life. And when you do that, the differences that you make, the higher choices that you make, spread out to those around you, whether you ever say anything to anybody or not. You don't have to stand up on a soapbox and say, hey, I've done this, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. That's just for most people, that's a turnoff. So I want to talk a little bit about the current situation that we are involved in with, for example, with the COVID thing. What's the answer to this? And first of all, I'm going to say it's kind of like religion or politics. It's been a very divisive factor for what I'm seeing in the people that are in my life, and the tiny bit of news that I watch. I don't really watch the news, but it passes by on my iPhone
Yeah,
sometimes.
you shouldn't watch the news. It's propaganda.
Yeah. So, but some people think it's not propaganda, and some people think it's the truth, and the mask, and hate the mask, and love the mask, and why aren't you wearing the mask, and how come you haven't got your shot? So what is the solution? Evolve out of this. How do you do that? Well, you stop focusing on either hating the mask or loving the mask. You stop judging people who have got vaccinated or who have not got vaccinated. You start minding your own business, really, and just living your life, focusing on the good things, focusing on the things you enjoy, and lift yourself up, all right? Because in the higher dimensions that we're moving into, this is not an issue. COVID is not an issue at all. Hatred is not an issue. Politics is not an issue. It's life. It's going to be possible to live life to the fullest.
Yeah, it's well above that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I looked at, like when this whole thing first well, maybe not when it first started, but as it was continuing, and I could see just how much fear induced is put into this stuff.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
and I kind of stepped outside of it and just said, you know what, I'm going to remove myself from that. And because there's just more important things to do in life and better things you can do with your time than feed on fear.
Masterful solution, masterful choice. Congratulations, Dylan. That's wonderful. So, I'd like to talk a little bit more about where we're going to, because, people used to think that the fifth dimension was the be all end all of everything. There's even a group that was popular when I was in college called the fifth dimension. Well, the fifth dimension is low man on the totem pole at this point in our evolution. We don't have third dimension. We don't have fourth dimension. What? What? People say, what? What are you talking about? We evolved out of those energies. In 2009, the third dimension left. Now, that's really incredible, because all of humanity, except for the kids that have just been born in the last few years, since 2009, all of humanity has existed in third dimension since our our conception, however many millions of years ago. So it doesn't mean that some people are not hanging on to third dimension mentality, which is survival of the fittest. An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, step on whoever you can to get to the top. That's old thinking. That's third dimensional mentality, and it's based on fear. I've got to survive. Fourth dimension left, I think it's in about 2015, 16. So we're in fifth dimension, and some people are in sixth dimension. My goal, and I'm sliding into and out of seventh dimension, and that's so exciting, because it's possible to live in seventh dimension as a non-dual being. Now, what does that mean? Well, duality. Earth has been a dual world, so that's the pendulum swing. That's the highs, the lows. You've got murder, you've got love, you've got anger, you've got the opposite. So it's back and forth, swinging back and forth, and focusing on, for example, the mask really keeps that pendulum swinging of the emotions, the highs and lows. So focusing on, like we talked about it, like on higher choices for your life. Finding a job that you really love, that you feel empowered, that you're making a difference, for example. Leaving a job that you hate. Don't waste your time there. What does it mean to be non-dual? Well, if you think about duality, it's nothing like that. Duality, we struggle. And we struggle. We struggle to manifest. We can manifest things, but it takes sometimes it takes a long time depending on how much conditioning you've got to overcome. And most of us have quite a bit. We've got all that genetic lineage that says, you're not good enough, you'll never make it, it's too hard, you give up, don't try, all that kind of stuff, that stuff that goes on in your head. Seventh dimension, non-dual, there is no resistance to creation. Now, let me say that again. No resistance to what you want to create. Instant manifestation. Now, the thing is, you need to be really clear when you're in that kind of a mentality of mind state. You know, you need to know what you want, and then you just say, "I want it," and it happens.
That to me sounds something similar to people that have had near-death experiences and stuff like that, or have done like past regression work and had lives between lives, and they talk often about having the ability to just kind of manifest or think of things and they appear.
Yes, right. Well, that's what we're moving towards. And the other part of it that is really hard for some people to grasp, both my sons and my relatives it just goes right over their heads when I mention this. So I don't talk to them about it anymore, but there's no death. Now, as a baby boomer, that's pretty darn appealing to me. That was never on my radar. You know, my paradigm until until the last 10 years or so was, I'm going to get older and I'm going to get sick probably and I'm going to die. And many people will choose that, but that's okay. Everybody's going to go to the good place. But I decided when I heard that, I thought, well, sign me up for that. You know, I don't want to go through that. I don't want to get older. I don't want to get sick. And so I'm focused on heading the opposite direction, younger. You need to check me out in about a year, 2 years tops, Dylan. Because I'm going to be younger. I've seen my version of myself when I'm looking about 23. So that's possible in seventh dimension. And even though, you know, there's people that, well, a lot of people are thinking about moving into sixth dimension. And Gia herself is supporting that evolution. So there's a group of us that are going to be a group of us that practice the same energy work that I do, Serenity Vibration Healing. I'm going to be in Egypt on November 1st and November 11th. I'm going to be in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, November 11th. Send out love. Send out love to everybody.
That's impressive.
Yeah, that's the way to go, you know. And people that are ready for love, they'll just say, oh man, that feels so good. That energy feels so good. People that aren't ready for it, just brush it off. So that's not manipulative. And you know, anybody can join in that anytime. Actually, you don't even have to wait till November. You can just do that before you go to bed at night. Say, I'm just sending love to everybody. So I'm excited about moving into seventh dimension. I'm sliding back and forth from 6 to 7, 6 to 7. Some days are better than others, just like everybody else, you know. Some days it's like, oh, you know, golly. And other days it's just great. It's just a wonderful feeling. So how, you know, what do you do to get into seventh dimension? Well, I mentioned something about, you know, don't work for somebody that you hate. Don't do work that you hate doing. You know, just start looking at your life and seeing what can you do better? What can you do better that will feel better for you? What can you do that will give you more fun?
So how did you get here to this point of sliding between sixth and seventh dimension? Can you give maybe the audience a brief overview of who Joy Elaine is and how did you get to this point?
Oh, you know, it's been a lot of work. In my 40s, and I'm 75 now, going to be 76 in February. In my 40s, may have shared this with you before. I went to a workshop for the nutrition business that I have. And we had to write down some goals for different areas of our life. And I could come up with physical goals and business goals and family goals. I could not come up with a thing for spiritual goals. was zero. It was a blank. I was looking around and everybody else was just having no problems at all. And I thought, wow, that's kind of a wake up for me. So I started investigating. I started investigating things like I've done the past life regression things. I've done Akashic record reading studies. I've done work with angelic healers. I've done a lot of things, okay? And I've studied a lot of different modalities. And then I came across Serenity Vibration Healing in 2003. And it fit me. I could physically feel changes happening when I was doing the work. All right. So I still use that modality daily.
Now, when you're doing that type of work, energy vibration healings, is that,
Yes.
I mean, is it done like with music, or how does that work?
See, I'm a musician, so the fact that it was vibrational healing was appealing to me.
Right.
And it's what it is about lifting your vibration. Okay. Because we're all vibrating at a certain speed, and the masters of light are vibrating at this speed, and that's why sometimes they can't, it's difficult for them to even appear in this reality. They're at a higher level. And that's what we're moving into. We're all moving into those higher levels. Giza herself, she's on the Joy Council with a group of masters that I work with. And she's focusing on supporting that move into sixth dimension. More and more people will feel drawn to move into those higher dimensions. And it's just happening anyway. Okay. So I've done work with a lot of work with the Ascended Masters. I've worked with tutorials with well, it's been years of study. Okay. I've done all the levels of Serenity Vibration Healing. There's 4 levels of it. So I've cleared my karma, cleared curses, cleared old contracts, cleared all that kind of stuff, and work with quantum level reprogramming to start shifting how I think about things, because my parents grew up in the Depression, and that was my my upbringing. My dad's stories about it was $30 a year to pay the mortgage on the farm, and they had to struggle to pay that. That kind of thinking, and being poor as we grew up. That's a mindset of learning to let that go and to allow yourself to be prosperous, because the universe wants you to be prosperous, right? So I can't really tell you all the work that I've done, because it's involved several hours every day in studying of the different exercises and things that the masters of light have worked with me. But the good news is, and I'm not the only person that's doing this. There's a group of us that are involved in these higher level trainings, and our purpose is to make it easier for everybody. It's like the person in the front with the machete hacking through the jungle. Oh, it's like, when somebody climbed Mount Everest and finally people realized it could be done. It's like when Roger Bannister broke the, how many minute mile? I forget. When somebody does it, it makes it easier for everybody else. So you guys are not going to have to work as hard as I have. But it's important to do things like, that serenity work. It's basic work. It's on my website. It's called The Joy of Life. I have 2 websites. My author website's joyelaine.com. And my Serenity Vibration Healing website is thejoyoflife.info. I'm sure you can post that information for you.
Yeah, I'll post it in the show notes.
So it's been, it's a lot of getting this part right, and listening to this part, right? Heart consciousness.
It's a process, right?
It's
something that it takes lots of years of work.
But it's going to be easier and easier. That's what my point is. It's getting easier because it just is easier to live in these higher dimensions. You don't have to do the struggling that you've been doing. If you're struggling, stop. Stop it. Don't do it anymore. So I think you had some questions you wanted to ask me. Then have we hit on any of those?
Yeah, you hit on, well, just I wanted to get your thoughts on, healing energies in general, and kind of, you talked a little bit on the last time we talked about being able to manifest stuff through the power of the mind.
Mhm.
So, just kind of maybe you touch on that. I mean, is that kind of what we're doing here with these healing modalities?
Yeah, well, we've always been manifesting. That book that I read years ago, one of the first books I read was Seth's book by Jane Roberts, and said, "You create your own reality." And that was astonishing to me. That was completely out of my whole way of thinking. I was in my 40s, I think, when I read that. And it was just like stunned. What? I create my own reality? Well, we do. And the thing is, in the lower dimensions, creation sometimes took quite a bit of time. You think about you want something, and then all this stuff comes up. Well, I don't know if I can have that. That's never happened in my family. I've tried that before and it's never worked. All that naysaying, which is a powerful, break. The universe says, "Oh, you don't think you can have that? Well, you can't." So, so getting past that in third dimension was a big challenge. Now, as it's going to get easier. You may have noticed that you think about something and you kind of let it go and then it shows up. Where did that come from?
I've
Yeah,
noticed.
yeah, yeah. And so imagine, how incredible that's going to be when you think, "Oh, I think I'll have blonde hair today," and you do. Or I think I want to be, 3 inches taller, and you are. I mean, they're talking no limits. I mean, this guy that I meet in the first book that I wrote, Path of Sweetness, Astar Commander. All right. Oh my gosh, is he handsome? I mean, talk about the epitome of tall, dark, and handsome. And I wasn't expecting that. I was like totally floored when I saw him. I energetically imagine, okay, think about Star Trek. Beam me up, Scotty, okay? Well, I did that. Only I left that was my energy body. I left my physical body sitting on my sofa. Okay,
Uh-huh.
I'm sitting there in the middle of the afternoon,
Right.
and I'd done some work, some energy work to assist the Ashtar Command. And I thought, I want to give this to them. So Energy Joyce zipped. I said, "I'm just intending to go to an Ashtar Command spaceship." Okay, I know people are like, "Huh, really?" Well, the modality that I use has given me the ability to do that. It's a technique, okay? We call it gating, using a gate. And it's kind of like astral traveling, although there's more of your energy presence there. And the cool thing is that I will be able to do that my physical body eventually. That's teleporting. That's in our future. So I'm
Is
standing
that
there, and
is that what other species or aliens use?
non-dual aliens, yes, not non-dual. Okay, the duality, I don't know about because they're like Earth. Earth's the
Yeah.
duality. Now, there's been masters in the past that have been able to do that. To teleport, to shift their body, to be in two positions at once, to levitate, those kinds of things. That's an ability. That's a few masters have attained that. So anyway, I step on the spaceship, and it turns out I didn't learn until later. This is on the 10th dimension above Earth. Okay, I was in third dimension at the time, but like I said, this serenity vibration healing work. So I'm there, and I popped in, and I'm feeling different because and I look down at myself, and I don't look like this here, right? I'm feeling really young. And I was really young. I looked like about 23 because I saw myself later. Anyway, I'm standing there, and this guy is standing in front of these big windows, huge windows, and you can just see out into space. He is wearing black. Okay, black shirt, black tunic rather, a, a sleeveless tunic, black trousers, gold braid around the edge, long black hair. I was a goner with that. And I was so stunned. I did manage to just hand him the stuff, and he greeted me. And anyway, it's in the book, but he's 25 million years old. He looks like he's about 30. He's the youngest. He was the youngest in the Astar Command of all the millions of ships that were there just kind of watching Earth. So he was kind of like a baby, kind of like a 6-year-old, because he hadn't had as much life experience as these other guys had. So, age is like, it's a whole different concept of age in non-duality. You look whatever age you want to look. The whole experience of meeting these masters and of meeting the Astar Command has been so thrilling for me. I had never thought I was going to write a book. But after, I was this in February 2014. When I got to about June, I thought, gosh, I've got to tell people the possibilities for Earth, because he was talking about where Earth is going, where Earth is evolving to. And I thought it was like a breath of fresh air for me. It was uplifting. It was a spiritual, like, oh my gosh, this is possible for me too. So that's why I've written these books. There's 6 of them that I've self-published. They're called the Joy Chronicles.
I see that you're revising them now, right?
They've all been revised.
Yeah. How'd that process go for you?
Well, it's pretty tedious, but I feel that they're finally as good as I can make them. See, I had an editor. My first editor was for just copy. It was like, the punctuation, the spelling, blah, blah, blah. But these 2 girls that have edited them again, they got me. They knew what I was saying, and they streamlined it so that it's more readable. I'm really happy with the work that they did. There's more detail, but it's more. I think they're much more engaging. So I'm really proud of the work.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. And now, are you still in contact with the Astar Command? And
yes,
I'm assuming so.
Yes.
And how's that been going?
Well, there's some great information in my blogs, interview that I did with Commander Astar, and interviews I've done with the galactic masters that I work with, beings like Osiris and Isis and Hathor and Tot, the Egyptian guys, because we thought they were gods because they're non-dual. See, those abilities, when they can just appear, whoops. So, plus Osiris is teal colored. Not too many people you see that are teal colored. So anyway, talking with them and interacting with them and finding out the Astar Command. The Astar Command, at the time that I first contacted, told us there were 86 million ships around Earth, and they were just kind of watching us. Then as time went along, we formed in the second book, I formed something called the Joy Council, which is, I had so much fun in the first book working with Osiris and some of the other masters that I thought I didn't want it to stop. So we formed the Joy Council. There's one in the center of the Earth and one on the 10th dimension of the moon. And so Astar is on the table, although he's out in the different universes now, because now there's a Joy Council in every universe, 47 universes. 47 universes. People wonder, is there life in the other worlds? Yes. yes. They're looking for planets like Earth, and that's a limiting thing, because there are beings that live on Saturn and Jupiter that are energy. So I don't know. There's
well, they're looking for material, right?
Yeah, right. And then there's just, the beings run the gamut of possibilities.
Yeah.
I just recently watched the Hobbit movies recently again. And those elves, those Orlando Bloom with the long blonde hair and
Yeah.
ears. I said to Tornos the other day, I said, are there other species like that? He said, there's probably 600 species in your universe alone that look like that. I went, oh, see, I think these writers like Tolkien and, Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek, they're channeling that information. At some level, they know that beings like that exist, and then they just write about them, and people are like, "Oh, that kind of rings a bell. That's fascinating."
It does seem that way, especially a lot of science fiction. It seems that way, like it's been channeled or.
Yes, exactly. And I'm still reading fantasy books, but some of them I can't read anymore because they're just so wrong. I hate to say that, but I mean, I used to read some of the vampire books, and I can't touch those anymore because that species was not any. That was horrid, really. Ananda told me that I never found a being so focused on evil as this one that we ran across. So anyway, my latest blog article is about mythical creatures.
Oh, speaking of that, mythical creatures, you're talking about these non-dual creatures that can kind of fade in and out of reality. Is that what a Sasquatch is?
Bigfoot. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Well, they're duality.
Yeah.
But they have the ability to move across a couple of dimensions. And that's why it's so hard to find them, hard to see them. Sometimes a youngster gets a little bit curious and they step in here and take a peek around and then whoops, and then they zip right back.
I gotta go.
And it's their protection, it's to protect them. I mean, if they were living here in the same dimension as humans are, can you imagine what would have, they probably would be gone already.
Yeah, that's a valid point. So this blog on mythical creatures, tell us more, please.
The Yeti. I asked Ananda about them quite some time ago because I've been curious about those types of creatures. Since I met the fairies and the dragons, I'm kind of wondering, well, what else is there that really exists that we don't know about? Well, Sananda said the Yeti, they had a ship that crashed here a long, 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 long time ago. And that's why they're here. I asked Gia how many there were, and she wouldn't tell me. She said, they're evolving just like we are, and it's their privacy because they're very. I don't know that people have ever really seen them. Maybe they caught glimpses of them, but they did. They were a dual race. See, even though they were duality, they had the capability of creating a spaceship, and it crashed. So they were kind of stranded here. I don't know how many. I know that they live in the higher, mountains and stuff. So what else did I ask her about? I asked her about Cyclops.
Oh, okay.
And she said those were created and brought here from other worlds, and the purpose was as a means to control and manipulate humans because they're scary. So what else did I ask her about? Trolls. She said, well, the big ones, and I thought about, they're supposed to live under bridges. She said, that's cartoon stuff, but there were little ones that were created that were kind of like clay. And I asked her about them. She said, well, you'd have to ask one of the initiates in the ancient academies who created them. See, before humans started having souls, about 120,000 years ago, people from other worlds came here to study. People from non-dual worlds, they had all these super abilities, and they came here to duality to learn to develop those abilities in duality. Because on a non-dual world, you think, well, let's lift that rock and it lifts right up. But here in duality, that's a big challenge to be able to master something like that.
Right.
So one of the homeworks was to study initiatives was to create a new kind of creature. And that's how the dragons came about. Initiates in the ancient academies created dragons. They even had contests like fire breathing to see whose dragon could breathe the furthest, fire the furthest. So lots of creatures that were, Gia created lots of things. She brought the fairies into being. There are dragons on other worlds, and there were dragons here on Earth from the initiates created them, and then we killed them off twice. That's the stories. The dragon slayers kill them, right? Well, in book 2, Blossoming of Love, I talked with Gia and I said, I'd like to have the dragons come back. And so we did. We brought them back. They're obviously not to this dimension, because again, who wants to kill off the dragons a third time? So she brought them back to a dimension that was, I think it was the 7th dimension at that time. Nobody was in that dimension. There was a safe place for them. So, there's the creatures and in book 2, there's a lot of creatures that she tells me about that we brought back. So you need to read that one if you want the full scoop. But it's just fascinating to me that things like the flying horses and what else?
Pegasus.
Yeah, really, they exist. I've met them in book 2 also. Flying horses.
All these things that are in fantasy or I don't know, our culture's lore, whatever you want to call it, you're saying is all real. What then? How is that the case of why these stories have come to be about these creatures?
I think so. Some people can see when kids are little, they can see the fairies. Little kids.
Yeah, I've
Because
actually
they don't
heard
have
that.
the filters, that say that can't exist. So then they grow up. Well, that's what happened to me when I was little. Up until I was 8, we lived on a farm, and I was out all day playing with the fairies, hanging around with the fairies in the trees. They let me into their garden. And then we moved, and I lost the fairy gardens. They stay in their garden, and we moved only about a mile down the road, but it was a different fairy garden, and I forgot about fairies. I grew up and I just forgot completely about them. And then one of my angel guides in that second book reminded me about the fairies that I used to play with, and then I was able to connect with Shalaya again. But yes, I think so. Now, some of the things that we think are real aren't. And I'm not going to tell you what they are.
Have they ever talked to you about Mothman?
Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Oh, Gia said,
All
no,
this stuff exists, and there's no such thing as Mothman.
not in Mothman. No, sorry, because I did ask her about that, because I've been curious about all these things.
Wow.
So Loch Ness does.
Really?
Yep. Bigfoot does. Yeah.
Okay. Anything on Dogman? Have you heard of Dogman?
I haven't investigated that. I haven't asked about that.
It's pretty terrifying, some of the stories that I've heard people talk about on other podcasts that I listen to. Yeah. I've never met anybody that's actually had an experience or heard of anything about it, but I have listened to quite a few people tell their story, and it sounds pretty scary.
Well, everybody experiences reality in a different way, and I've just been fortunate to be able to experience the reality that I've been experiencing with meeting the dragons and meeting the fairies and interacting with them. So, and there are other people that that quote believe in dragons or believe in fairies. They just haven't had maybe the experiences that I've had. The good news is that as we evolve, those creatures will be back because we won't be killing them.
What does the council or even like entities from the Astar Command say about the current state of our world and what's going on with people? Are they concerned? Do they think that we're headed in, a good, bad direction, or does it not matter?
Well, I say you just want to get out of fifth dimension. They're not concerned. They know that no matter what happens, like I said, everybody ends up in the good place. Talked about that in the second book called Fifth Realm. You might think of it as quote heaven. I don't use the term heaven because there's so much upbringing that people have about that. But my mom and dad, when they died, that's where they went, and I was still able to talk with them. You know, dad looks like he's a young man. Mother looks like she's in her 20s. They died when they were in their 90s. Mom was 89, dad was 97. So not to worry about the outcome is good for everybody, no matter when they die or how they die or if they manage to evolve into the higher dimensions. But as I mentioned before, it's going to be easier and easier to live on Earth. And that's where your focus, where I hope people will start to focus. We will focus on what's good about their life. They will focus on lifting themselves up with, making better choices, forgiving themselves, forgiving everybody else, just sending out love. Loving starts with loving yourself. And I got a lot of great blog articles that use the Serenity Vibration Healing modality in them to help people uplift themselves. And those are free. Commander Astar talked about the coronavirus last year. That's a great blog. It's got a Serenity Vibration Healing shield in it for the coronavirus that covers all the possible permutations of the virus. So there you go. You don't have to worry about COVID. Just take heart and focus on taking care of yourself and sending out love. That's really the message that the masters want to share. The fear that you talked about, I'm so glad that you didn't buy into that, because that's fear just,
Yeah.
just
And the way I see it too is I don't know, I've dropped, I'm not saying I'm not completely scared to die, but I've dropped a lot of fear over the past few years, just because I've come to a pretty good understanding that, we don't really die, and that we live forever. So there really is not a whole lot to fear, because no matter what, we're going to be okay.
Yeah, exactly. So glad that's the attitude, I mean, if I'm dealing with people who are 25 million years old, 75 is they tell me you're a baby, So, and Laponi, the genie that we have, is he's 94 quadrillion years old. That's 94 with 45 zeros after it.
That's insane.
No,
I can't even wrap my head around how old that is.
I wrote that out in my book. And in Britain, I think it's 65 zeros, quadrillion. So it's just like he's the first genie ever created, and you get to meet him in the first book.
Yeah. That man, you've lived an interesting and fun life.
I'm blessed. I'm very blessed. And it wasn't, it took me, like I said, in my 40s, I just started searching because I thought there's got to be something more than what I'm doing,
Right.
And
do you think it might not, it might or might not, I'm just curious. Do you think your love for music, and you're a professional musician, right? Do you think that had any kind of influence on any of this, or no?
Well, that was why I was attracted to Serene Vibration Healing. I thought it had, originally I thought it had something to do with music, but it doesn't really. It does has to do with, lifting your vibration. Well, the Gloria, I don't know if you're a musician, if you've ever performed in a group, that you feel so marvelous when the music is great and you're with the group of them and you're playing and it's just fantastic. That's uplifting. Those kinds of experiences are uplifting. Even if you don't play, going to a concert I'm not talking about, and this is a judgment, I'm not talking about the boom, but a boom, but a boom, but a boom. I'm talking about something that when you listen to it, you feel better. You feel uplifted. You feel happy. And a rock and roll, fine, whatever. So yeah, find your passion, find what you're passionate about. And that's really the way to, live your life. I'm passionate about these books, about sharing what I know with people. So that comes across.
You mentioned that you've done some past life regression work. What are your thoughts on past lives? And
Well, you know, it's not really a past life.
that's a good point, because we're
Because it's
always
all
in the
happening.
now.
It's all happening now.
Yeah,
You
so
know?
it's another current life, I
Yeah,
suppose.
right. It's like how do they explain it? You know, they try to explain it to me. And it's kind of like it's kind of hard to stretch your mind to it. Um, the only way I can grasp it is I pretend that all the creation is spread out below me, and I'm up here looking at it, and I see, oh, there's that life that I experienced as that farmer in Oklahoma. On that first past life regression, I went back to the day I was shot. Okay, the guy says, you just look at your feet and what you're wearing. I said, well, I'm wearing muddy boots, and then I realized, boom, I got shot. You know, and it, you know, it was it's like it's an aspect of your soul image. You're not actually that person, really. It's an aspect that's close to you on the matrix of creation.
Right.
And the matrix is not like a multi-level marketing thing. It isn't like Adam and Eve and blah 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 blah. Like a kaleidoscope that's constantly shifting.
What is it about the death with past life regressions? You mentioned death, but it always seems like everybody that usually gets past, gets regressed, they live through that death moment.
It
What is
didn't
it
hurt.
what is it about it though, that why do we need to live through that and see that?
Well, first of all, it didn't hurt. I just
Right.
realized, oh, I'm dead.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it was, and the only thing that I was concerned about was my family that I left when I
Yeah.
was killed. So I hung around for a while, and that does happen. That's people. There are ghosts. There's such thing as ghosts because they didn't finish something or they're concerned about so and so, and
Right.
they hang around. Um, I'm sorry, I kind of lost track of what you asked me.
No, just that it just seems like it for whatever reason, it's always an important part of somebody being regressed is they need to see the death scene. They need to go through that, live through that again for whatever reason.
Well,
I feel like there must be some significance or importance to it.
I imagine that it's startling to the personality, you know, the personality aspect of yourself. I did several regressions and I did die in another one of old age. But it was interesting. In one of the lives that I went back to that was really fun was I knew it was riding on an Arabian horse, and I was a young man, and I was racing in the desert, and that's one of my fascinations in this life has been Arabian horses. All right. And I did chat with my dad who'd passed over, and I said, because he was my dad in that lifetime. And I asked him about that lifetime when we were, I was in Arabia. And he said, well, which ones do you want to talk about? Because I forget, there were like 20 or 30 that, because we come back, we have those experiences in our soul group of, I don't understand it all, frankly. I finally thought, well, I've done enough of that. I've done enough of the past life stuff, and it's not really a past life. It's just an aspect of my soul energy. And I thought it's more important to focus on the here and now, on what I'm doing with this life.
Yeah, that's good. It
This
is.
life is the important one.
Yep. The one that you're currently
This
experiencing,
one right here. This one.
the
This
here
life.
and now. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
It is interesting.
I'm glad I did it, but it's not something I did that years ago, probably. Maybe in my 50s, early 40s, late 40s, early 50s. So it's been 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
She's not interested in doing it again, but it was fun. It was interesting, like I said.
You mentioned focusing on the now. How important is it to not dwell on the past or not look too far into the future and just focus on the now?
Well, that's the non-dual people live in the moment. They can do simulations and projections about the future, but that still changes, It's challenging. It really is. And I think that's why I'm mentioning the SVH work, because it helps you release, it helps you deprogram.
Right. It is challenging,
It
probably
is,
because we're living in a human body, right?
yeah. And all the genetics, if you
Yeah.
think about all the women in my line, of the challenges that they face, and the struggle, and then how harsh it was. I mean,
Mhm.
it wasn't a piece of cake living in those
That's right.
1700s, 1600s, and women, for example, wow, we kind of had a tough road to hoe. So it's, I would suggest, whatever you can do to let it all go. It's going to get easier. As one, I keep harping about that. It's going to get easier. It's going to be easier and easier and easier to exist in this reality, and we just keep lifting up. Um, take heart.
I
Watch
agree
it.
with that.
Read a good book. Enjoy a good concert. Take a walk in the park.
Have they have has the council or anybody mentioned anything to you on the lines of the so-called climate change or pollution and what we're doing to the environment?
Yeah, well, I've talked about that some.
Mm-hmm.
So you focus on worrying about that. And that's the other thing that you're going to evolve out of. I mean, I do my bit. I recycle. I don't consume. I don't use plastic whenever possible. I do the things that I think are important. But I know that when you manifest with a thought, well, I mean, it's going to be pretty darn easy to be in harmony with yourself, with nature. Um, it's where you give your attention to. If you're fearful about that, if you are fretting about it and stewing about it, you just are giving that energy, that reality, more energy. So you know stop littering and stop worrying. And
Yeah.
that's a challenge for me, because I can remember sitting and listening to my mother, my grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
my mother's sisters, all sitting and stewing about something, about
Right.
worrying about so and so.
Right.
Oh, I just don't know. My mother was, Joyce, now you better be careful. You're not sure that you want to travel by yourself. Are you sure you want? Maybe, worry was a habit.
Right.
And so that's been a challenge for me.
I get it.
Yeah,
It is a challenge. I mean, I know I've worried about things in my life. Obviously, I'm human. I think we all have. But like I've moved away from a lot of that, but I think a lot of my worry now is just mankind and where we're going and what we're doing. And I feel like, you mentioned connection with nature, and I feel like in some ways we've lost a lot of that connection that we maybe, our ancestors once had.
right.
And I think that's
I agree.
important to have a connection with nature,
Yeah, I agree.
because
On the
you
home
go ahead.
on the home page of my website, there's something called a golden ticket. I think I've probably talked about this before. And it's about manifesting ideal scenarios. And I use that every day. I use it several times a day sometimes, because it helps me. It's like it's a clearing that keeps on clearing whatever issue that you're addressing, to so removing blocks to what you want to manifest. That's focusing on what you want instead of what you don't want. And I'll find myself, focusing on, I don't want that. Okay, you have to switch to focusing on what you're choosing. And that is a mindset thing. That's been probably the biggest challenge of my life, is to quit focusing on, quote, the bad. you know where's the money going to come from, blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff, and just focusing on, well, I've always been supported. I've always had the money whenever I needed it. It's always worked out. And my fairy Shalia Chuck conked me with her fairy wand for luck forever. So What can you say about that? Live forever. That's for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So use, I think use that ideal scenario, that golden ticket. It's a really easy thing to do once you get it, once you have activated the serrated vibration clearing tools in it. You only have to do that one time. That's described on the website. So,
Mhm.
you know, read my blog. I've spent a lot of work on writing those articles, talking with the masters, asking them, what can I tell people now that will help them? What kind of visions can we manifest? Can I give them to help them manifest the reality that we're moving into? Visualizing the crystalline cities of light.
Right. Well, and I think it's been a wonderful conversation, and it's always good to have you on. And I think despite, how much ever the listeners believe or don't believe about your stories, you always offer insightful stuff that I think can be very helpful to people's lives.
Thank
So,
you. That's
and
my
thank
goal.
you for sharing. I think it's wonderful advice, and you're always a pleasure to have on the show. Where can the guests find you, find the wonderful work that you're doing?
My website, joyelaine.com. That's got my books on it. It's got my blog on it. It's got lots of wonderful free things for you to read about. You can read about the books. There's a little page on each book. There's radio interviews that I want, like, the ones I've been doing with you and other ones. And contact me or sign up for my newsletter. I send out an update about once a month about what's happening. And then that's my author website. The website that I use for the Surrender Vibration Healing is thejoyoflife.info. So those are the two ways. And I'm on my computer a lot. You email me out. If you've got questions, I'll get back to you probably same day. I'm going to be out of the country in November. So be in Egypt then. So
You're gonna have to let us know how that goes.
yeah, I'm excited. We're going to be in the Nile. I've been there. I've been to Egypt 2 or 3 times. So
Uh-huh.
we're going to be at Abydos and Cairo and Aswan. And,
That's so cool.
yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
I'll take lots of pictures and enjoy.
I will.
All right. It's been a great discussion. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Dylan. Good to talk to you.